Hello, welcome to video 9, Pivot Table, Pivot Chart and Power Pivot. Pivot Table, Pivot Chart and Power Pivot lets you make sense of a large data table or even an external database. And in this video, I'm going to show you Pivot Table and all its numerous options, Pivot Chart, how to import an external file, and Power Pivot. So let's get started. Here is the table of pizza sold, this time around including price, quantity, amount sold, and then time range. Let's do a small calculation here. We know amount sold is equal to price times quantity. Remember in the video on how Excel handles data, I said to begin a formula you start with equal to. So we'll do this multiplied by quantity. And that's how we calculate for amount sold. I can double click on this when this arrow changes to this thick black cross. I double click and it will do for all the other cells. Voila, we've done for everything. Now this is a huge data table, 5,000 entries. How do I make sense of this? And this is where pivot table comes in action. If I select the entire table, I do Ctrl Shift down to select the last entry. I go to insert and I click on pivot table. I'll get this pop-up box asking me if I'm okay with the selection criteria, selecting this entire table, and do I want it in a new worksheet or in this present worksheet. I always go with the default, and here is a pivot table. Now these are all the fields in my original data table. I can drag the pizza sold to row label to see the unique entries of each pizza. And if I want to see how many pizzas were sold, this is the quantity, right? If I drag this quantity down to values, it's going to show me the sum of chicken, barbecued chicken sold, the sum of beef suya sold. So I get the quantity sold per pizza type. And if I want to see total sales, I drag the amount sold also to values and I get to see the amount sold. I get to see that this is what we made from barbecued chicken that day. And that's one of the very good use of pivot table. You can easily do a lot of analysis without having to enter formulas or do anything elaborate. So once I'm done, I'll copy the pivot table and go paste it where I need it. Say, I need it here. But when pasting a pivot table data, don't paste directly. If I right click and do paste, normal paste, you'll see it drags along the pivot table field list, which I don't want. I only want the data. I don't need these other things. So I'm going to undo. So instead of pasting normally, I'll paste as values. So that way I paste only my values, and then I can begin to make some changes, do some general formatting, include border. I make the first row bold. I change this to pizza type. Change this to, yeah, I'll leave it as sum of quantity, but I'll change this to total sales amount. And I'll make this formatted with the comma. I'll remove the decimal points, and then I'll change this to currency to show naira. I can easily do that by coming here. I'm going to copy the format. Let me redo that so you'll see. I'll click on this. I want to copy the format here, so I'll come to format painter, and then I'll go select where I want to apply those formats. Then it does it for me. I've automatically put the format of the Naira currency on these cells. So that's how you use a pivot table. Let's go back to our pivot table. Now, let's say you want to make a chart of this. Without having to go out, you can easily do that by inserting a pivot chart. There are two ways to insert a pivot chart. I can go and click insert a chart right from here, and I'll get a special kind of chart. You don't see these options in a regular chart. I get to select what I want to view. This is a filter option. If I want to see only for chicken, barbecue. You don't get all these in a regular chart. So that's why I say this is a unique chart. It's different. It's called a pivot chart. So regardless of how you create it, so I'm going to remove the filter. I'll select everything. So we are back to normal. You notice this changes, the pivot table changes with what I do here. They are both linked. So that's one way of inserting a pivot chart. The other way is straight from here. Again, I'll select all these table data, and then I'll come to insert. But instead of inserting a pivot table, I'll insert a pivot chart. Once again, I'll go with the default. So right now I get to make the pivot chart straight without having to make a pivot table first. So I'll drag the pizza type to, as usual, to my row. Then I want to see the quantity, and I also want to see the amount sold. Okay. You'll see I'm getting a table, a corresponding table similar to what we did the other time, but this time around I also get a chart along with it. I like using chart layout 3. Then just like a regular chart, you do whatever you want to do with it. You can change the chart title. You can do pretty much any other thing you could do on a regular chart. So that's all about the pivot table and pivot chart. Before I go to the Power Pivot, let me just show you how you import an external file into Excel. So here is a blank sheet. I've downloaded a list of failed US banks, and it's in text. So I want to import it into this Excel sheet. So how you do that is you go to Data menu, and here you can select, you see I can insert, I can import from Access, I can import from Web, I can import from text. In this case, I have a text file. This is what I'll use. And if I have other sources that are supported by Microsoft Excel, I can import using them. So this time around, we'll go to the from text, and my file is somewhere down here, bank list. Here I get the options of, is my file delimited, meaning is there a regular character that separates each field? In this case, yes, there's a comma between each field, separating each field. So that's why I'm going to go with this delimited. But in some cases, you might not have any regular character separating your fields. You have to go with this fixed width. So I'm going to click on next. I have delimited already taken for me. Here I have to specify what is that character that is separating each field. I know it is a comma, so I'm going to come here and choose comma, and you will see that it's already showing me a preview that this is going to be a field of its own, another field. So I'll just click on next, and here it's, do I want Excel to try to guess what the field type is for me? If I choose general, that's what happens. Or do I want to specify that a field is a text? So I'm going to go with next. Excel is pretty intelligent in figuring out what the field type is. So I'll go with the default once again. Click on finish. Then it's going to ask me, where do I want to start the first data? Do I want it to start from cell A1? I'll go with that. Remember I said in building data sheets that scale, it's best to start as close as to cell A1 as possible, which the closest is actually starting from cell A1 itself. So I'll go with that. That is it. I have my external file imported. So that's how you import a file into Excel. So let's go to Power Pivot. Power Pivot is like pivot table, but if you've ever scrolled down to the bottom of an Excel sheet, you'll see that you have only 1,048,556 rows. So if you have a data with more than this data rows, you won't be able to import it into Excel. You won't be able to work on it. And this is where Power Pivot comes to your aid. You're able to import a file that is larger than what Excel can display ordinarily. But in this case, you want to also do pivot table analysis on it. So it's not going to import it directly into Excel, but it's going to let you be able to do some analysis on it and make your analysis generated in Excel. So for Power Pivot, you can only access it on Excel 2010 and 2013. So in my case, I have it in my 2013. So I'll go straight to my Excel 2013. This is Excel 2013. And I have a data, one huge file, about 740 megabytes. I can't open it in even Notepad or any regular text manipulation or in any regular text manipulation application. So I'm going to import it using Power Pivot. So this is Power Pivot in Excel 2013. This is how Excel 2013 looks like. And Power Pivot is one of the many. It might not be enabled by default for you. You have to enable it yourself if you want. So I have it enabled for me. And so I'll click on Manage. Okay. Because I had done this before, it has it here. So I'm going to redo it. So don't worry. I'll go to Get External Data. I want to get data from other sources because I'm not using database. I downloaded it, so I want to get it from other sources. I'm going to click on other sources, and then I'll scroll down to where there's text file. So what I want to import is a text file. So I'll click on text file, and then it's going to ask me where is the path, where is the file located. I'll browse to where the file is. So this is a file I downloaded from US Open Data Source. It's a file on transportation analysis. I really don't know so many of the things in the file, but this is the file I'm going to import. It's 760 megabytes. So I'll click on open, and Excel Power Pivot begins to import it. Okay, and so it's done importing it. I would say use first row as column header. What I have in the first row are the column headers. So I'll do that. Okay, so I'm done. As you can see, this is a huge data set, data table, lots of columns also. So I'll click on finish. So it's going to import. To take a while. And so once I'm done importing, I get this table. So this is my imported data. So I need to do analysis. I can only do Power Pivot table analysis on it. I can't do other Excel kind of analysis. That's why it's called a Power Pivot. It lets you work on a data so huge you can't import into Excel directly, but you want to do some analysis on it. So I click on Pivot Table. I'll say I'll use my existing worksheet this time around. So I get the regular pivot table options. So I can decide I want to see all the regions. I drag it to row. Then I want to see all the SMA. I want to see the number of SMSA in each region. It does that for me. So it's also a pivot table, but pivot table for a very huge data table. So that is it on Power Pivot. And that's all for this video. The next video is on business data analysis. Don't forget to subscribe to our blog. Thank you.